Here's something they never mention about the end of a marriage. Your former spouse is stepping into an emotional wasteland she's been denying existed for years. This isn't some wishful thinking about karma catching up or her suddenly seeing the light and begging to return. This runs far deeper, far more devastating. It's about the moment someone exchanges what's real for what's imagined, then watches that dream dissolve slowly before their eyes. Picture this scenario happening right now. Countless men occupy quiet rooms, endlessly refreshing social media feeds, observing her posts about fresh starts and newfound happiness. These men torture themselves believing she's flourishing while they're barely surviving. But the actual truth behind those carefully filtered images and inspirational messages tells a completely different story. She is approaching a truth so severe that her mind will fundamentally restructure itself just to handle the mental conflict. When a woman exits a long-term marriage, she isn't simply walking away from you. She's abandoning an entire mental framework she never acknowledged. Consider this carefully. Throughout your time together, you served as her anchor for everything. Every choice, every feeling, every future vision included you somewhere in the picture. Even during moments when she vented to friends about you, you remained the focal point of her mental world. Now she's drifting through emptiness without direction, desperately trying to convince herself that this disconnection equals liberation. Let's examine what genuinely happens because this sequence is remarkably consistent. The initial stage is her personal celebration period. This extends from 2 weeks to roughly 3 months. She's intoxicated by her own courage. Mourning brings self-congratulation for being so brave, so powerful, so self-sufficient. She transforms her living space, begins that exercise routine she always mentioned, perhaps explores dating platforms, just to survey possibilities. Her circle feeds her constant affirmation like an addictive substance. You look incredible. You're radiant. You deserve far superior. And she absorbs every word completely. During this window, she's not experiencing actual reality. She's inhabiting a narrative she's constructed about reality. The tale where she's the protagonist who broke free from ordinariness, where limitless opportunities await discovery. Her device constantly notifies her of connections and conversations. Men offer her attention she hasn't experienced in years. She reads this as confirmation of her correct decision. What remains invisible to her is how she's confusing volume for substance. Notice for genuine interest, and freshness for worth. Then arrives the second stage, where circumstances become compelling. The revelation, though it resembles a prolonged collision, it begins subtly. She attends her initial authentic encounter since the separation. The person appears ideal theoretically, attractive, accomplished, articulates perfectly. They share dinner, perhaps cocktails. Everything proceeds smoothly. Then as evening concludes, he advances. Suddenly, she experiences something striking her like freezing water. This person holds no genuine concern for her, not authentically. He remains unaware that storms frighten her, or that she needs to verify the lock thrice before sleeping, or that certain advertisements make her emotional. For him, she represents merely another evening. That's when the first fracture appears in her story. But she persists forward, because acknowledging uncertainty now means acknowledging potential error. And that's mentally unbearable. So she intensifies her efforts, additional encounters, additional platforms, additional evenings, socializing. Except now something shifts. The attention feels less intoxicating. The praise rings empty. She begins observing details. How these men discuss previous relationships, how they treat service staff, how rapidly they attempt physical escalation, and gradually, unconsciously, she begins measuring them against you, not deliberately understand. Deliberately, she maintains the narrative that you caused the problems. But beneath awareness, her mind performs its natural function. It's matching patterns. It's evaluating and contrasting. That seemingly charming person constantly interrupts her. The professionally successful one maintains emotional distance. The exciting, impulsive type is actually just careless and drinks excessively. And with each evaluation, you improve retrospectively. Not because you achieved perfection, but because you were familiar. You provided security. You represented home. This triggers the third stage, the alarm response. Typically surfaces around the 6 to 8 month period. The novelty has entirely evaporated. Her friends exhaust themselves hearing about her romantic exploits. Her children, if present, demonstrate behavioral issues because their foundation has crumbled. And she's been too occupied discovering herself to recognize. She's drained from sustaining the facade of contentment because that's what it's become now, a facade. Each declaration of living optimally requires increasing effort. Each public smile weighs heavier. She's a performer who's lost track of why she accepted this part. The alarm manifests differently. Some women accelerate dramatically, becoming nearly frantic in seeking validation. More encounters, more pursuits, anything to prevent stillness with their reflections. Others withdraw, spending complete weekends immobile, examining old photographs, attempting to determine where everything derailed. But they share one universal element. They begin reconstructing the past. The marriage that seemed so unbearable. Perhaps it wasn't that terrible. You the person she couldn't tolerate nearby? Perhaps she judged too harshly. The future she felt certain about. Perhaps she calculated incorrectly. And here's where psychology becomes fascinating. She cannot simply acknowledge error because that would obliterate her entire self-concept. She invested months, potentially years, constructing an identity around being the woman courageous enough to depart. Her complete social narrative builds on this basis. So instead, she performs something intriguing. She crafts a fresh narrative. One where perhaps you've transformed. Perhaps you've matured. Perhaps if circumstances differed currently, success might follow. This permits her to consider reunion without admitting wrongness. Meanwhile, let's discuss what's occurring in the romantic landscape she's navigating. Because this is where truth truly strikes. The available pool for a separated woman, particularly one with children, doesn't match romantic fiction portrayals. The interested men fall into several predictable groups. There are manipulators who view her as vulnerable prey, someone fragile and desperate to feel wanted. There are married men seeking affairs who conveniently omit mentioning their wives until several encounters later. There are perpetually unattached individuals who remain solo for substantial reasons she's about to uncover. And yes, some genuinely decent men exist, but they're either committed or possess numerous alternatives. And she's competing against women unburdened by separation history and dependence. She begins recognizing something frightening. The perceived value she assumed she possessed doesn't exist. All those platform matches are illusions. They match with everyone. Those compliments about her appearance, they're duplicating and transmitting them to countless women. That connection she sensed. He experiences it with anyone willing to be intimate. The harsh reality of post-separation dating impacts her like a heavyweight fighter. She's not exceptional. She's not distinctive. She's simply another profile among thousands. Stage 4 represents the accounting. This typically occurs around the 1-year milestone, though it can extend longer for women particularly resistant or particularly skilled at self-delusion. The accounting is when psychological protection systems finally collapse. She cannot sustain the story anymore. The isolation is crushing. Not the type of isolation where you desire a company, but the existential variety where you comprehend you've demolished your entire existence for an illusion that never existed. She occupied her space one evening, perhaps following another disappointing encounter or another weekend where the children stay with you, and it will strike her comprehensively. The scale of her actions, the permanence of it, the reality that she exchanged an imperfect but authentic connection for a flawless but fictional one, and the burden of this understanding is so immense that some women literally cannot process it. Their minds deactivate emotional processing just to endure it. This is when the late-night messages commence. You recognize them. They typically arrive between 11 at night and 2 in the morning. They begin casually. Hey, how are things? Or, I was just remembering that occasion we... But what she's genuinely communicating is, I'm sinking, and you're the only rescue I recall. Sometimes they're hostile messages blaming you for incidents from years prior because anger is simpler than remorse. Sometimes they're melancholic messages, reminiscing about positive times, testing whether connection still exists. But they all signify the same thing. The alternative wasn't superior. It was synthetic. But here's what's genuinely happening neurologically during all this. She's experiencing mental conflict at a level that's actually modifying her brain structure. Daily, her mind must balance two incompatible realities. I made the correct choice departing, and I'm miserable and everything has deteriorated now. The mental strain of maintaining these opposing beliefs is genuinely exhausting. It impacts her rest, her eating, her concentration ability. Some women develop anxiety conditions, others sink into depression. Many develop emotional deadness where they cannot experience anything profoundly anymore, because feeling would mean confronting reality. Let me describe the Sunday evening phenomenon. It's this occurrence where separated women experience their worst moments on Sunday evenings. Know why? Because Sunday evening is when the performance concludes. The weekend has ended. The distractions have vanished. The children are sleeping or at your residence. Tomorrow brings Monday and another week of pretending everything's acceptable. And in that silent moment, typically between preparing for rest and actually sleeping, truth infiltrates. She's isolated, genuinely isolated, not independent, not liberated, not empowered, just isolated. And the universe possesses a harsh sense of irony about this, because right when she's reaching maximum remorse, you're likely beginning to recover. You've experienced your own stages, the shock, the fury, the sorrow. But men typically process separation differently. We internalize, we reconstruct, concentrate on action rather than emotion. So by the time she's recognizing what she surrendered, you've already started becoming someone transformed, someone improved, someone who absorbed lessons from the marriage and the separation. Someone who, ironically, might represent the man she always wanted you to become. This creates psychological agony for her, because now she can observe the version of you she always claimed she desired, but it's too late. You achieved it without her, because of losing her, and the knowledge that she triggered your improvement, but won't experience the benefits. That's a unique type of torment that prevents her sleeping. Let's discuss what occurs with her social network during all this. It's because women's connections, particularly surrounding separation, are fascinating from a psychological viewpoint. Initially, her friends become her supporters. They gathered around her, proclaimed she deserved superior, helped her construct the narrative that departing was courageous and correct. But as months advance, dynamics transform. Her married friends begin distancing themselves. Not deliberately, but instinctively. She's now a hazard, a reminder that marriages terminate. A single woman who might draw their husband's notice. The invitations to couple gatherings cease arriving. The group conversations proceed without her. Her single friends, the ones she assumed would become her new community, they're competitors now. They're all fishing in the same restricted pond, and friendship becomes secondary to survival. Plus, she's not genuinely single like them. She carries complications, past experiences, possibly children. She occupies a different classification, and everyone recognizes it, even if unspoken. So, her social environment, which was supposed to expand after separation, actually shrinks. She discovers herself with fewer genuine friends than ever previously. The isolation intensifies. The support network she relied upon reveals itself to be conditional and temporary. And she realizes something terrifying. You weren't merely her husband. You were her closest friend, her emergency contact, her automatic companion, her sanctuary. And she discarded it all for what? For the concept that something superior was waiting. Here's a psychological reality that nobody discusses. Women who exit marriages, particularly lengthy ones, often develop phantom connection syndrome. Just like amputees sense phantom limbs, separated women sense phantom connections. She'd catch herself turning to share something amusing that occurred, then remember you're absent. She hear your voice internally commenting on things throughout the day. She awaken, and for a brief instant forget you're gone, then must relive the loss repeatedly. This isn't necessarily love, it's neurological. Your brain invested years organizing itself around your presence, and those neural connections don't simply vanish. The universe appears to conspire to remind her of what she surrendered. Your melody plays on the radio. She discovers one of your old shirts in the laundry. The children express something exactly how you would. She visits that restaurant you enjoyed and realizes food lacks the same quality without someone to share it with. These aren't merely memories. They're psychological weights that drag her back to the reality she's attempting to escape. And then there's the mathematical challenge of discovering someone fresh. Let's be realistic about the statistics. If she's 35 or older, separated, possibly with children, seeking a serious connection with a quality man who's also single, emotionally accessible, financially secure, attracted to her, and willing to accept another man's family, the statistical probability is brutal. Add in her own standards and preferences, which haven't adjusted to her new market reality, and you're examining odds that would make a lottery ticket appear like sound investment. She cannot acknowledge this, not to others, and especially not to herself. So, she develops survival mechanisms. She reduces her standards, while telling herself she's being more receptive. She accepts treatment she never would have previously while calling it flexibility. She tolerates disrespect and frames it as not obsessing over minor issues. Each concession erodes her self-worth. But the alternative, admitting she made a catastrophic error, is psychologically unbearable. Some women enter the transformation stage. They suddenly become obsessed with self-improvement. But not the healthy variety, the desperate variety. New hairstyle, new physique, new wardrobe, new personality even. They're attempting to become someone different. Someone who might succeed better in this new reality. But it's like rearranging furniture on a sinking ship. The issue isn't her appearance or behavior. The issue is that she fundamentally miscalculated what was available versus what she possessed. The genuinely tragic ones are those who enter rebound connections quickly and attempt to force them to be serious. They meet someone, anyone, who demonstrates interest and immediately attempt to recreate what they shared with you. They introduce them to the children too rapidly. They push for commitment before trust is established. They ignore warning signs because being with someone problematic feels superior to being isolated. These connections always collapse, usually dramatically, leaving her even more damaged than previously. And through all of this, you're the spirit that haunts everything. Not because you're performing anything, but because you're the benchmark. Whether she admits it or not, every man gets measured against you. It's not the you she separated from, but the idealized version of you that her remorse has constructed. The you that exists in her memory is superior to you ever were in reality, and no one can compete with the spirit that she's perfected in retrospect. Here's what happens subsequently. And this is where psychology gets genuinely dark. Around the 2-year milestone, sometimes earlier, sometimes later, she faces a decision. She can either acknowledge the truth and attempt to repair things, possibly attempting reunion, or she can intensify the deception and reshape her entire personality around it. Most select the second alternative. It's simpler. They become resentful, skeptical. They join online communities that reinforce their decisions. They become the women who tell other unhappy wives to depart. Not because it's correct, but because misery seeks company, and they need others to validate their choice. The ones who select honesty face a different challenge. How do you approach someone you've wounded that profoundly? How do you acknowledge wrongness when you've constructed an entire identity around being correct? How do you request forgiveness when you're uncertain you deserve it? The psychological burden of this is crushing. Many women report that the most difficult thing they've ever accomplished wasn't departing. It was admitting they shouldn't have. But wait, there's another dimension to this psychological collapse that most people never discuss. It's what occurs to her sense of identity at the fundamental level. See, when you're married for years, your identity isn't simply you anymore. It's you as a component of us. Every decision she made, from what to prepare for dinner to where to vacation, was filtered through the perspective of being a wife. Her neural pathways are genuinely formed around this identity. And when she departs, she's not simply losing you, she's losing who she was with you. And that creates an identity crisis that psychology literature doesn't adequately address. Consider the minor things she never had to consider previously. Which side of the bed to occupy when the entire bed is empty? What to watch on streaming services when there's no one to compromise with? Where to dine when every restaurant reminds her she's dining isolated? These appear trivial, but they're death by 1,000 cuts to her psyche. Every tiny decision becomes a reminder that she's navigating existence without a partner, and she terminated him. The financial reality is another psychological hammer that descends around month 9. Separation is costly. Being single is costly. That dual income that made existence comfortable vanished. Now she's attempting to maintain the same lifestyle on half the resources. But it's not simply about finances. It's about what finances represent. Security, stability, the ability to envision the future without checking the bank balance first. She exchanged financial partnership for financial independence. But independence without resources isn't freedom. It's just decorated scarcity. Here's something nobody prepares her for: the physical contact deficit. I'm not discussing intimacy. I'm discussing the 1,000 small contacts that occur in a marriage. The hand on the lower back while passing in the kitchen. The feet contacting under the covers. The automatic embrace when someone's experienced a difficult day. Contact is a human requirement, as genuine as hunger or thirst. And suddenly, she might experience days, weeks, without meaningful human contact. Her body begins to resist. Stress hormones elevate. Sleep becomes challenging. Her immune system weakens. She's genuinely becoming ill from contact starvation. But she cannot admit it, because that would mean admitting she requires what she rejected. The dating platforms become a particular form of psychological warfare. She's reduced to a collection of photographs in a description, competing with women 10 years younger who do not have physical imperfections or emotional complications or schedules dictated by school routines. The algorithms are merciless. They display her to everyone initially. That chemical rush of matches and messages. Then, as the platform learns she's selective or maybe too mature or maybe too complicated, her profile gets concealed. The matches slow to a trickle. Messages become inferior quality. She realizes she's become invisible in a marketplace that only values youth and availability, neither of which she possesses anymore. Some women develop performance exhaustion. They've been performing contentment for so long that they forget what genuine emotion resembles. Their smiles become automatic, not authentic. Their laughter sounds empty even to them. They post about living optimally while crying in their vehicles after dropping the children at school. The gap between their public image and private reality becomes so vast that they feel like they're reliving a dual existence. And maintaining that dual existence is exhausting. It's like being an undercover operative in your own life. It creates the final psychological torture: remorse without resolution, awareness without action. She knows what she surrendered. She knows it was her decision. And she knows it's irreversible. She must exist with this knowledge every single day. Every contented couple she observes is a reminder. Every romantic film is pain in the wound. Every wedding anniversary that passes without celebration is a monument to her miscalculation. And then there's the moment. It always arrives when she observes you content. Maybe it's a photograph on social media. Maybe it's encountering you at the store. Maybe the children mention how much enjoyment they experienced with you and your new companion. And in that moment, something fractures inside her that can never be fully restored. Because your contentment is evidence that the issue wasn't the marriage, it was her perception of the marriage. You're capable of contentment. You're capable of affection. You're capable of being the man another woman desires, which means you are always capable. She just couldn't perceive it. Or worse, she perceived it but wanted additional. This is the final psychological strike. The realization that she didn't exit a negative relationship. She exited a relationship she made negative in her own mind. And now she must exist with that knowledge forever. Observing from the periphery as you construct the existence she convinced herself was impossible, just with someone else who appreciated what she couldn't. The cruelest irony. Many of these women eventually realized that the difficulties in the marriage were entirely about you, or even mostly about you. They were about her dissatisfaction with herself that she projected onto the connection. The restlessness, the sensation that something was absent, the sense that existence should be more thrilling. Those were internal issues that departing you didn't resolve. Departing you just made them worse, because now she must face them isolated without the stability and support you provided. So what genuinely happens to your wife after separation? She receives exactly what she requested. Freedom, independence, the opportunity to start over, and she discovers that what she requested and what she desired were two completely different things. She desired to feel vital again, but she feels lifeless inside. She desired excitement, but she received chaos. She desired to be wanted, but she became replaceable. She desired superior, but she received different. And different isn't always superior. Sometimes different is simply different. And sometimes, more frequently than anyone desires to acknowledge, different is inferior. The ultimate psychological revelation that strikes these women, typically years later, is this. They didn't depart you because you weren't sufficient. They departed because they believed they deserved additional. But deserving and receiving are two different things. The market doesn't care what you believe you deserve. Reality doesn't adjust to your expectations. By the time they comprehend this, the opportunity to repair it has typically passed. That's the truth about what happens to your wife after separation. Not the social media version, not the story she tells her friends, not even the story she tells herself, but the genuine raw psychological unraveling that occurs when someone exchanges a flawed reality for a perfect fantasy and discovers that the fantasy was the biggest deception they ever told themselves.